we don't have 2,000 more years to discuss it.
Hello, and welcome back to In Search of 42. My name is, of course, Felix Becker, and I am your very own success coach on this journey we call life. Now, as before, I am sharing an incredible conversation with you with the amazing Thomas Rosenberg. Thomas started his career in the energy sector, and he has some wisdoms to share that relate to the future of humanity. You'll hear more about that in our conversation together. But a rather traumatic event changed his life, and he has now become a somatic coach. What that means and what he does will become apparent in our conversation. We even go through a couple of exercises as part of our conversation that you might be able to follow along with as well on your end today. If you like what you're hearing, if you like what you're seeing, reach out to Thomas or myself for more information about what we do and how we can help you. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, rate, review, do all those things, because it helps us reach more people like you who are tuning in to gather some wisdom from Thomas Rosenberg today. And remember, the more people we can reach, the more people we can help. People just like you. But with all that out of the way, let's get right into my conversation with the one and only Thomas Rosenberg. Thomas, really awesome to do this. Really awesome to connect with you. I know we chatted a little bit on LinkedIn before we got going here, but let's tell the world, who are you?
Who am I? I am Thomas Rosenberg. I am a somatic leadership development coach based in the unceded lands of the Ohlone in Oakland, California. And I'm really passionate about connecting people to themselves so we can more easily connect to each other, so we can more easily, fully share our unique gifts with the world.
That's awesome. That is really cool. How did you get to be this person? What was your story?
Well, this little boy was born. um, there are so many ways to answer that, Felix. The short answer is that I have always been passionate about growth and transformation and supporting that growth and transformation in others. And the through line in my career has been helping people get comfortable with change, guiding them to lead through change and to flourish. But coming from a medical and scientific family, I felt compelled to follow a different path, one that was more technically challenging, to be seen as a man. And so I instinctively found those places to insert myself into coaching opportunities all along the way, sort of as a mentor, as a coach. But it wasn't until my near fatal bicycle accident 9.5 years ago that I just said, why am I backing myself into somebody else's box? Why am I trying to be something or someone that doesn't honor all of me? And, looking at things from a technical perspective, a good friend who remains on the technical side of the space, she said to me, she said, technology gets us on a good day 15 to 20% of the way there. The rest of it is people. It's how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to each other, and how we relate to the planet. And I just, when I heard that, it so deeply resonated down to my marrow. And it's got to do with people. Whatever life energy I have left coming out of that accident, I just said, I'm going to dedicate it to sharing all of my gifts fully, living fully. And, part of this was inspired by a dear friend of ours who passed. So it took me 2.5 years to trust my brain again after my traumatic brain injury. And a dear friend of ours, right about that time, was passing from pancreatic cancer. And she was such an inspiration, still is an inspiration, because she found ways to share all of her gifts fully. She died with tremendous grace, surrounded by community. And I said, that's what I want. Like, what more, what does it look like to live life richly? And so a month after she passed, I was starting my first coaching certification program.
Yeah. That's obviously a very difficult story for you with all these, your accident and then the passing of your friend. Um, but I think the important takeaway is the one that you mentioned, that it's all about community. It's all about the people we are living our lives with, whether that's at home and that's our family, friends, co-workers, right? It's all about the people and how we interact with each other. So let me back up for a second. You said something, you were in the like medical technical industry before you went full time into coaching. So obviously,
So I come from a medical and scientific family. My I spent over 20 years in the energy, climate, sustainability world. And I worked in over 20 countries on 5 continents. I entered spaces as a subject matter expert, and during my time as a management consultant, which I did for 10 years, I was coming in showing people how to change their companies, their organizations, and their communities. But there were always people who were plucked out of their standard role. They're maybe as a material scientist or as a quality assurance person, and dropped into this coordinating role as a professional development opportunity to say, okay, we have this new initiative around sustainability or whatever they happen to call it in the organization. You're going to lead it. And they're like, right? They're just freaking out. It's like, I don't know this space. I don't know what to do. And so I would help them get comfortable in this new skin while also helping their company transform. And that's really when I realized, oh, I'm coaching. Right? Like when I look back, I'm like, I've been coaching for over 20 years.
yeah, it's interesting you had that realization. Did you have actually before I get into that question, just maybe on a more humanistic, future oriented, if you were sort of in the energy sector, this may be a broad question, but is there any hope left for our humanity with what's going on in that area of energy consumption, global warming, greenhouse gas emissions, all that stuff? I don't know exactly what part you played, but being from that world, is there any hope left for us?
So this is exactly, well, it's not the only reason, right? But this is very much central to the reasons why I left the technical side of the space. Because what I recognize is all too often people are just saying, well, I can claim a carbon savings of X if I do Y. It's like, okay, you've already changed the light bulbs 5 times. Let's talk about fundamental shifts in business model. Let's talk about fundamental shifts in the way that you process materials, you source materials, right? And this gets back to how do we relate to between ourselves, to each other, and to the planet. And so for me, this also, I my company name is Regenerate Coaching. And for those who get it, inherent in that name is something about regeneration on a broader scale. And I'm pointing, frankly, in this case, since you asked it, I'll just be blunt about it. It's social permaculture, right? And it's really starting to recognize like what wants to happen here. We're at a turning point for sure in humanity. Um, People have been screaming for over a decade, but looking at the topics that were described in COP28, we were talking about those same topics after Kyoto in 1997. And how many years ago was that? And how much change has really happened? Part of the challenge, and I'm digressing here, but part of the challenge that I see is that the tax and accounting codes are embodying the worldview of 1870s. That's when they were codified. that is baked in. That's also the foundation of that same worldview is the foundation perspective of economics as a discipline. So there needs to be some shifts in how we approach things and how, some people have certainly tried to make those changes, but it's still very much fringe. It's not mainstream. So to if there is enough political will, absolutely. Right. Look at what Roosevelt was able to do in 6 months, shifting the economy from a peacetime to a wartime economy, and basically told everybody, it's like, you're going to stop tomorrow producing cars and you're going to be producing tanks. Well, yeah, it's going to take us too long. It's like, you have 6 months. And if there were that level of political will at all levels of government across multiple countries, but especially here in the US, yes, there's hope.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, at least there is an opportunity for us to still do something good. But it's something that that you said kind of I found a striking parallel inside my head now, and I don't know how much you know about the Stoics and the ancient Greeks, Socrates, Plato, etc. But if coming back a little bit to coaching, right? This whole mindset idea, that how do we set ourselves up for success in life? How to live life? What's the meaning of life? Right? All these deep philosophical questions we've been throwing around for thousands of years, and we still come up with the same answers. So I guess my question here is, do you think that's what's going to happen here with our world economy, our climate environment, our energy use in the future? Are we going to continue talking about the same things for the next 2,000 years and still come up with the same answers? Which is to say, yes, greenhouse gas emissions are bad. Global warming is happening. It will impact our food and water resources, especially in less economically well countries. Um, what really where are we at with the world at large, and as a community, as humans, not even across really across borders, not as individual countries, but as a community as of humans inhabiting this planet.
It, we don't have 2,000 more years to discuss it.
Okay. Fair enough. All right.
That's the short answer. Yeah, if we continue to kick the can down the road, um, even 10 years, there will be a time when humanity disappears. The Earth will be fine, but there will be a massive extinction that which we're undergoing right now, the sixth mass extinction in the history of the planet, and that is undercutting the very biodiversity that supports the food that we eat.
Yeah. Absolutely. This is humanity at stake, right? And I think at least on an individual level, that's what as coaches are trying to do, is trying to help people live better lives to make the world a better place for all of us, right? I mean, that's really at least on an individual level, that's what we do. So coming back to your coaching, when you recognize that you always were coaching others, and you're like, hey, I'm doing this anyway, so I probably should be doing this full time going forward. Um, I'm asking this question from my own personal bias when I discovered coaching for myself for the first time. Did you have any coaching? Did you have any actual experience with coaching yourself, or where did that epiphany come from that, oh man, I'm actually coaching people, and I should maybe learn something more and do this full time?
Yes, I did. So I was very fortunate to come across somebody who was actually recommended by a former colleague. And this was back in '09. And it was really impactful working with this person. And it's like, wow, I really like this. And I was really curious where she had gotten certified. And then I started observing the school. And then I took a course a few years later, but I was also in other environments about that same time. This is circa 2013. Um, that really opened my eyes to what becomes possible when you start doing more deeper inner work. Because I had also come to a place where, I had this very cerebral leadership style, and I kept spinning my wheels. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Why do I keep batting my head against the same stone wall? And it's not just because I'm trying to fit into somebody else's box. There's something else here, right? And so there was this challenge. And so, even leading up to my accident, I was already exploring the benefits of coaching and receiving coaching. And actually, somebody had encouraged me just to start coaching on the side. You can do this. You're already doing it. So why not just hang up your shingle? I'm like, okay. So I had a few clients, before getting certified, but being an overeducated white male, I felt I needed yet another certification. And
I can relate to that one.
So, I went to get certified as an integral coach at New Ventures West.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really love that you discovered that for yourself and that you even did some coaching beforehand. So how many months or years did you think you were coaching before you actually went into a formal coaching education program?
Mm. Well, it was I would say a couple, and then it was interrupted by my recovery.
Yeah, sure. And then what do you think the program ultimately changed for you? How did it make your coaching different?
Um, well, I'm fascinated by that because I'm also fascinated by reflecting back in terms of what has changed for me since I finished that program and how I have grown as a coach. So for me, it made me realize, these professional coaching certification courses are, regardless of the school you go to, are really, well, I'll say it this way, at least for New Ventures West and for the Strozzi Institute, about building the body of the coach, because we're coaching, that's our instrument. So we're working with you're doing inner work, and then you're also, how do I share this? How do I hold the space for somebody else to do their own inner work? And it was really impactful. It was incredibly deepening. As it, for me on my human journey, I realize in hindsight that where I was at that time, I still had to prove that I could coach from the head because of the brain injury. And I also, they helped me recognize that I needed to embody more as a coach. So that was something that was really impactful. And it was during that time that I learned about the Strozzi Institute. And I think in hindsight, had I gone straight to the Strozzi Institute, I wouldn't have benefited as much as I did when I went back in 2021 for another. So I've had over 300 hours of coaching certification courses, and the work with, deepening myself in my journey with the Strozzi Somatic Coaching Certification Program was just been incredibly impactful and deepening, and it's really helped me shift. And friends have commented on what they noticed during that process, just watching me evolve and deepen as a coach. And it's like, oh wow, you're showing up differently, and it's wonderful to watch. And it was like, wow, I thank you.
I went through Lumia, and I would say I had a very similar experience to that. Uh, on the one hand, the education gave me tools and techniques that I wasn't aware of before to be a better coach, but also going through that coaching training myself definitely deepened me and helped me understand myself better. And what it took to get there, and what I can now do to help others do the same thing. Um, Now, for you specifically, you have a very intriguing type of coaching practice that I honestly don't know much about, and that is somatic coaching. So a few weeks ago, I had an episode with Milena Stojanovic, who mentioned somatic coaching, and that was really the first that I really started digging into it. So tell me more about somatic coaching. What is it? What's the approach? What is somatic coaching?
Sure. So it's about bringing people back to the aliveness in themselves, right? So often, as you know, we grow up, right? Our society asks us to grow up and we stay here in the head. And for many people, we're completely disconnected from the sensations, right? The sixth sense is interception, are the sensations that are going on in the body, right? Whether that's tension or lack of sensation or temperature or pressure. Is it tingly? Is it streamy? Is it wavy? Like what's happening in your body when, and are you even aware of the neuroception that is coming into your body's awareness, right? So what I'm doing is I am helping clients work that way. So somatic coaching holds that we are what we practice. We're always practicing something, either by default or intention. So, how you sit, walk, talk, breathe, stand, the language you use with yourself, with others, the way you hold tension, all of that shapes your body. And that shapes your experience of the world and others' experience of you. So if of course, for those who are listening, they're not going to be able to see this, but you know, I'm standing here like this. But if I stood here like this on this call, right, you may be able to hear a distinction in my voice. But Felix, you're having a very different experience of me right now,
Oh, absolutely. No, I actually
right?
just noticed that shift as we
Yeah,
were pushing your shoulders back. So, yeah, if you're
right.
listening to
Yeah.
this,
So
Thomas really just pushed his shoulders back as he was talking, and I had that visual, cue that something was changing.
Mhm.
But I think if you're just listening to this, you can definitely hear that there was some difference in your intonation and your voice, and
Right.
your projection as well, right?
But I'm also holding a lot of tension in my chest and in my ribs, right? So this is a way that some people cut themselves off. And, so if I were to do that and then stand back here, you have again, it's a different experience, right? But imagine walking through the world this way, right? And then think about how you're holding tension and what that does to the physical manifestations of emotional. Are you stuck in flight, freeze, right? And so it's really helping people become aware of these stories and to understand, oh, okay, so this is where this comes from. And, the rather than talking about, well, a time when you got frustrated, let's talk about that. It's like, how about we feel it? Because then we start to recognize, oh, okay, I learned these habits, what we call in the Strozzi lineage conditioned tendencies, from a very early age, and perhaps even within the first 2 years of your life. So these were wise adaptations that protected your nervous system from complete overwhelm or meltdown. And you're continuing to practice that. And that is shaping your experience of the world, how you show up, how you let others in, and how others perceive you. And the so that's normal for your nervous system. When by working through the body, we can titrate the amount of newness, right? We can sort of say, okay, let's just put on another way of doing this. Let's just see if we can hold it for 10 seconds. I mean, don't necessarily time it, but the point is, let's just try this for a few seconds. Let's see if we can do it a little bit longer. Let's see what happens as your nervous system gets accustomed to responding in a different way and knowing, oh, I'm not going to be threatened. I'm not in danger if I take a moment to say, oh, okay, feeling a lot of anxiety right now, or anger, or whatever the emotion happens to be. I'm just going to let that run. I'm going to feel my feet. I'm going to deepen my breath. And I'm going to respond in the most appropriate way in this situation. And so just being able to say, oh, I have options. That's really what we're giving our clients, both individually and teams.
Yeah. I find that fascinating because we do hang on to a lot of things in our bodies, um, in ways that I was, uh, let's just say, never taught in medical school. I think you're right. Um, so I'm curious about something, and I don't want to necessarily dig into your accident because obviously that was very traumatic and your recovery was long. But let me just set the stage for a second, just so you understand where my question is coming from. I was a trauma surgeon in my former life. I saw many, 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 many people with traumatic brain injuries or TBIs. Um, I never really got to see the long term outcomes for most of these people. In the trauma world, follow up is very inconsistent and oftentimes doesn't happen. So there's really no long term relationship with these patients. And so I don't know what the long term recovery from TBIs really can look like for the most part. I mean, I've had a couple of examples. Um, and the other part of this is in medical school, I was taught nerve damage is permanent. Once you have nerve damage, especially to your brain, that's permanent forever. But uh, we've also learned in our coach training that new neural pathways happen, right? Neurons that fire together, wire together. So you can build new neural connections in your brain over time. And so in my mind, something like a TBI is not permanent. Something that will take time and a lot of work, but can be recovered a lot of times. And so I'm wondering how the somatic coaching fit in with you, and how somatic coaching could potentially fit in to other people who have traumatic brain injuries.
Mm, okay, sure. So I'll share a story, and I'll get to the question. So I was working with this wonderful group of people right around the time of my accident. We called ourselves the Heartstorm Collective. So instead of brainstorm, Heartstorm. And we put together a weekend retreat, and we had arrived at the location at the site, and we were just hanging out, and I was laying down because I just needed to be fully prone. And um, one of my colleagues, one of my friends in the group, comes from a he came from a massage background, and he just felt drawn to put his hand on my right hip and the right side of my head. And in that moment, and this is now roughly 4 months after the accident, the entire head was bathed in this green glow in my mind's eye, with the exception of where the first impact, because I skated upside down on my helmet and tumbled several times. So there was a spot in the back right side of my head that was black. And that was incredibly scary for me. My mom's an occupational therapist, practiced for 40 years. And so I grew up with stories of rehab, whether stroke victims or motorcycle accidents or what have you. And I knew that there was a window. The longer you go without wiring those neurons, the harder it becomes to create those neural pathways. For me, even though, over 50, they say, oh, you just don't remember things as well as you used to. But I know that for me, there is a distinct line. There are times when I miss language. So one thing that comes from TBIs is sound processing is impaired. So people might speak quickly, or there might be noise, like a car driving by, or the exhaust fan in the kitchen, or whatever it happens to be. And I just can't process the words. I'm like, I know somebody's talking at me, but I can't make sense of it. That's one thing that I noticed. Secondly, the there are times when language, like that just now, like I have to wait a minute because I lose the language. It's like I know their words, but I can't get them out of my mouth. And it has gotten significantly reduced over time. And it's still there. 9.5 years later, I'm still working with my osteopath on relieving my my trauma. And it's really fascinating to observe the layers, the onion of trauma in the body. And that's the other thing that really attracted me to somatic coaching, is just seeing my own experience of releasing trauma through osteopathy. So every month, every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks, on the table and experiencing, oh wow, like all of a sudden that's released. And it's just been really, really fascinating to see how that unfolds. And it's led me to last summer, I took this course called Somatics, Trauma, and Resilience, which the Strozzi Institute offers. And it was incredibly intense and one of the most profound experiences, 4 days that I can imagine. But it was really insightful for me because I recognized, for example, there are core traumas that we learn as a child, the messages that you receive, I'm not worthy, I'm not enough, whatever it happened to be for you. Um, and how that is stored in my body, and how that, and the overlay, and this is what I'm still parsing, how does that interact with and overlay with the accident trauma?
It's you're right. Trauma doesn't have to be physical. I mean, obviously you had physical trauma, but you also had mental and emotional trauma as a result of that accident. And for some people, it's just the mental and emotional part. Like you said, the you're not worthy, right? You're stupid. You'll never amount to anything in life, right? All those other traumas that people experience too are still traumas that a lot of adults are still dealing with. Um, and like you mentioned before, the longer you wait to do anything about it, the harder it gets. But it's not impossible, right? It just requires more time, more energy, more effort. You can still work through that, especially if you have a good coach by your side who can guide you along the way and help find you the right exercises, the right tools, the right mindset techniques, and all that stuff. So, one thing I'm curious about with this somatic coaching now. Soma obviously means body. There's some physical component I feel like to it. Can you do it virtually? Is it better in person?
It's different in person. So there are certain things that are available in person that wouldn't be available remotely. Obviously, if you and I were standing across from one another, the neuroception experience would be vastly different than seeing us online like this, right? So just having that experience is going to be different. It's going, and then there are certain things I can only see my clients, pretty much from the chest up, unless they back away, right? And um, there are times when, you know, I want to, like I was demonstrating earlier with the stance. If some, when I first entered the coaching certification program, we were standing and doing this exercise. And Dr. Richard Strozzi Heckler, my teacher and the founder of the Strozzi Institute, came over to me and said, "Do you mind if I give you a little adjustment?" I said, "Sure." And so he adjusted how I was standing, and I felt like I was going to fall flat on my face. And it made me realize that I had been walking through the world on my heels. And I learned last summer that some of that is intergenerational because I saw it in my father, right? And then also my father's behavior, the way he raised me, right? What was transmitted, what was seen as, right? And so it just is really fascinating to observe again, like this split between, so it's just like, so that's really hard to do without having somebody actually put their hands on you and say, okay, now drop the hips back a little bit, soften. Like there, for instance, there was at the holiday party, I was introduced to somebody who, uh, by a mutual acquaintance, and we started talking, and he was really intrigued, and so I just sensed into him, and I said, you know what, you're standing as though you have a hook coming out of your sternum, and you're just like you're hanging from that. And I said, what would it be like? So if you were even just to do that right now and just notice, Felix, like what happens if you were just to lift up out of your sternum and just notice like where your feet are, what's going on in your legs, what's going on in your low back, right? And I said, okay, now I want you to soften your knees. And he's like, boom. And I was like, no, no, not bend them, soften them, right? Just put little air pockets behind them. And then drop your tail. He's like, ooh, that's really hard. I said, yeah. I said, now relax your shoulder, relax, soften your chest. And he does this. I'm like, no, no, not the shoulders, the chest, right? And then in an instant, you could see that his breath moved from barely touching the bottom of the heart to being a full belly breath.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one. No, I can so see that because when I was just trying to do this posture, the first thing I noticed, besides my lower back pain, was really an inability to take a full breath. I was really just like, taking these really shallow breaths, and so yeah, with the breathing, I could definitely see that. So, um, which brings me to an interesting question. So, what do you think someone listening to this episode, what's one thing that they can take away or something that they could do in their lives right now? Maybe what's the first thing you work on with most of your clients that somebody could do at home today to improve their life based on some somatic coaching principles?
So one of the first thing is just coming back to yourself. So taking time to drop out of your thinking self into your feeling self. And taking a few deep breaths, finding your legs, finding your feet, noticing the quality of the contact on the floor. And, this is perhaps better barefoot or in socks, but just being able to say, oh, okay, so how am I standing? And just observing where you're holding tension, where you have sensation, where you don't. There's no judgment. It's just more, can you track it? Can you start building that sixth sense of interception? And that's where I would start, because whether I'm working with individuals or working with peer teams or groups, I'm starting with self awareness, because we need to know how we're showing up, what the stories are that are running our lives, and how that manifests.
Absolutely. I mean, knowing your sense of self is so important, and I think there's one little tidbit that you threw out there that is something that probably most people get wrong, and that is we have a thinking self and we have a feeling self, but oftentimes we equate the two, and it's usually the thinking that overrides the feelings, right? And we ignore the feelings or we don't know what to do with them. And so we revert back to the thinking self, and that's probably more left brain thinking. And we're trying to obviously open more right brain thinking, that feeling thinking, that more global perspective thinking about yourself and where you fit in the world. So I think that's a beautiful exercise actually to try to ground yourself literally to figure out who you are and where you are, not just physically in this world, but metaphysically where you are in this world as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Well, and I would go a little bit farther, Felix, in saying that it's not so much right brained, it's actually feeling like the body, and moving just like, oh, okay, in this moment, as you touch the floor, what are you noticing in your feet? Like, what's the sensation? Are you experiencing tingling? Is it just lots of pressure because you're finally aware of the weight of your body on top of your feet and you haven't been paying attention to that. Are your feet getting warmer? Are they cold? Right? What's going on? And it's fascinating. I have a client who's on the opposite side of the country, and just working even remotely with some of the centering and some of the somatic self awareness, when she's able to drop in, her feet tend to run cold, but when she's able to drop in, her feet run warm. And so just observe these things, because this also tells you the ramifications of cutting yourself off from yourself.
Yeah. One thing that I started doing, I'm sure you've seen this too. Everybody's always on their phones, right? And pretty much the only sensation you have is that smooth glass screen these days, right? So, one thing that I have started doing for myself that has really changed my perception and my mindfulness about the world is not just what you just described. We're trying to, what am I feeling right now? But also, what are objects in my life feeling like? So sometimes I just run my hands over the counter just to see what that feels like, right? Even with food in my mouth, sometimes I'm a very fast eater, and taking the time sometimes to really savor that food in your mouth, the texture and the taste and the smells, has really dramatically changed how I live my life, because I am now so much more aware of myself and the world around me as a result. And it's, these things, like, we're talking seconds here. We're not talking like I spend an hour, touching the counter, or running my hands over a towel or something, right? This is literally just a few seconds of like, wow, what does that feel like? That's fascinating. So who are your ideal clients? Who do you like to work with?
So I love to work with folks who are innately curious and collaborative, who are willing to go on a journey of self discovery and co creation, who are passionate about supporting the growth of others. And, um, typically I focus that primarily on executives, but peer teams. But I'm open to working with anybody who fits those attributes, of being innately curious and collaborative.
Yeah, collaboration beats competition any day. And right.
Yes. Well, and especially as a coach, right? Because I'm on this journey with you.
Right. Right. Very much so. Absolutely. Absolutely. I just had that discussion with someone the other day. Is the coaching client relationship is not. I mean, we always say it's about the client, but us coaches want to get something out of it too, right? And it's not just the financial rewards of you paying us our fee. It's also the growth that we're seeking for ourselves, and the reward of seeing you grow, and change as a result of that relationship. So there absolutely is stuff that we want to get out of that relationship as well. So I could totally resonate with that on so many levels. Let me ask you a couple of questions. I wrote a networking book a few months ago. It's not a textbook, right? I don't know if you heard about it. It blew up LinkedIn one weekend, and it's really changed my networking and how the people that have come into my life in the last couple of months. So I want to ask you a couple of questions out of that to paint a little bit more color on who you are. So I think this is a great question for you. Who or what is your source of inspiration?
Hmm. Can I answer both of those? Who's and what?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. If
So
there's a who and a
yeah.
what, totally.
So the who, and actually this came out of reflection that I got from the cohort mates from this class I took last summer on somatic strum and resilience, but and how I was showing up. But I realized that I am walking very much in the very big footsteps of my maternal grandfather. And so honoring his legacy by continuing his legacy. Um,
Can I ask what his legacy is? And I'm asking because I never met my maternal grandfather, but he is a bit of a hero in my own life as well. And but unfortunately, he died about a year and a half before I was born, so I never got to meet him. I only heard stories about him.
Right. So my maternal grandfather was incredibly generous, incredibly humble, got along with everybody, even if there was a language barrier, he somehow found a way to communicate. Got along with folks from all different backgrounds, uh, very curious, and a man of intense integrity.
That's beautiful. That's how we all should be, right? I mean, that's really sort of how we all should live our lives. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. No, no, really, that's awesome. I love that.
So yeah, and the what is nature.
I have a question coming up for you in a few minutes from the previous guest. That's going to be perfect for you. I can't wait to get there. But as a follow up to that question on the source of inspiration, what's your favorite motto or tagline to live by?
Hmm. What is thy favorite motto? There was something, and I'm going to butcher it unfortunately, but there was something that somebody posted recently, a quote from Gandhi, and it was basically what it boiled down to was when you have full alignment, and I'm paraphrasing very strongly here, when you have full alignment between your actions and your words, and you are authentically showing yourself, then you have happiness. And I would also argue that you also have integrity, because for me, that's the definition of integrity.
I'll second all of that. No, no doubts about it. All right, last question for me. Again, a bit of an odd one, but I kind of like it. What's a food that you like to eat that other people might find weird or odd?
Hmm. Food that I like to eat that people might find odd. Um, well, I'll just say raw sauerkraut.
Interesting. I mean, I'm German myself, and actually, sauerkraut is one thing that I don't really care for that much. What is it about the sauerkraut for you? I mean, fermented foods are great for your body,
Right.
right?
Yes, they are. And we have an amazing pickled food shop close by. So we get some, one of my favorites is actually a sea kraut. So it's got seaweed and ginger and as well as the cabbage. And I'm a savory person. So one, I know my body feels better after it. Um, and I've actually, there are times when I've eaten it, I feel calmer. So that tells me something about the microbiome mind connection. But I love the play in this particular sea kraut mix of the different flavors, like the bite of the ginger and then the brininess of the seaweed that blends into the fermented liquid that comes in the jar. So that's just what really appeals to me. It's the mingling of all those different flavors.
Yeah. Honestly, it sounds intriguing. If you can, you should send me a jar because I kind of want to try it.
I'll see if I can get it to you without breaking.
Yeah, I know that's always a challenge. All right, so here's the last part here for the show. I started this months ago, but I stole this from Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO. To be honest with you, but each guest gets to ask the next guest a question, not knowing who that person is or when we're even going to record. So this question for you comes from Naveed Shah, who is a just like me, coaching introverts. He's now living in the Middle East in Dubai. Fascinating individual. who also, just like you, likes to ground with nature. And so the question he has for you, and I think it's perfect for you, what can we do to bring humanity back to its essence?
Well, I feel like that's, returns, interestingly enough, right back to the top of the call, right? Is what were we discussing around, reconnecting to yourself so you can more easily connect with one another so we can reconnect to the planet. And, I feel like with the challenge of having approximately 8 billion inhabitants on the planet, that we have focused on division and what makes us different rather than focusing on shared humanity. And we're a social species. And so, yes, there are us and them. And in my experience, focusing on that which unites us moves us so much farther because we recognize we need clean air, we need clean water, we need food, we have different perspectives that can enrich one another. We have art that can speak, music that can speak across languages that can impact people. So let's focus on that.
I think that's beautiful, and I think you're right. It goes right back to the beginning of the conversation, and I knew this question was coming up, and so I that's why I thought this question was perfect for you. Um, so, well, now it's your turn. You get to ask the next guest a question, not knowing who that person is or when we're even going to record. I think I'm recording later today, but you know, I don't know who it is.
The question that is bubbling right now for me is, who are you becoming and why is that important to you?
I think that's a good question. To anybody, right? I mean, that's a good coaching question, right? Who are you becoming? Who do you want to become, and why is that important? Yeah, it's a great question. Listen, Thomas, this has been a fantastic conversation. How can people reach out to you? How can they connect with you?
Sure. So the easiest thing is to go to my website, regenerate.coach, and there's a big orange button right above the fold, and you can just click on that, get on my calendar, and I'd be happy to chat further. It's free, so no obligation, but it'd be lovely for folks to reach out. They can also follow me on LinkedIn or sign up for my newsletter, whatever they prefer.
That's awesome. I'll make sure all those links are in the description below for anybody to find them more easily and readily and connect with you. I know we connected on LinkedIn, and it's that's been such an enriching experience for me. Even like some of the little banter we had online in the comment sections of variety of posts. So that's awesome. I'm looking forward to continuing to see more of you on LinkedIn, obviously. So any final words you have for the world?
Hmm. Just reconnect to yourself, right? That's boom. That's it. Yeah. Take take the time. That's all I was going to say. Is just take the time to reconnect to yourself. You will reap the rewards greatly.
And I think, especially in today's world where our attention span is continuously diminishing, taking that time for ourselves is so important. So, yes, you're absolutely right. I agree with you. Awesome. Thank you for being here, Thomas. This has been great. So much value here. So much awesome conversation. Truly appreciate being on the show. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Felix.
All right. I really hope you enjoyed that. The questions that I asked towards the end are from my new book, The S.I.M.P.L.E Networking Tool. It's a great book that redefines how we network. It's all about who someone is and not what they are. So if you want to get your own book, it's available on Amazon. If you want to learn more, there's videos about it here on YouTube. So you can check out this amazing new social science experiment. I'm so excited for it. If you do get a book and you do start your own, please let me know how it goes and what your experience is like. I'm working on the second edition and I want to make it the best one yet. So be sure to tag me, let me know how it goes. Thanks for watching.